European guidelines are actually closer to 350. And again, I think that's a low number as well, but it kind of shows the difference between the US and the European. Look, these used to be in the 400 or 500s, right? If you go back 30 years. So why, if somebody can explain to me why you need less testosterone today than you did 30 years ago, I'm all ears, right? But we know that's not true.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. Today, I am very excited to have Shalin Shah on the line with us. He is the founder and CEO of KYZATREX, which is taking the industry by storm right now. It is a new form of oral testosterone. As we all know, in fact, if people want to call themselves biohackers, the ultimate biohack, especially for men over the age of 40, is going to be testosterone. A lot of people don't like doing injections. There are many downsides as well with doing injections and getting big spikes and things like that. So this new oral testosterone, I heard about it about a year and a half ago, and I was very, very interested. We're going to really dive deep into, previously there was always this rumor of, oh, you don't want to take oral testosterone. Okay, it can cause some issues for the liver or something like that. This is completely different. We're going to go into all the details of that. So Shalin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Tor. Pleasure to be here and chatting with the audience.
Absolutely. Let's just, start with a little background of, how did the company come about and get to where you guys are today?
So Marius started as almost 10 years ago now. Actually, this was KYZATREX was a phase 3 ready drug. So we still had to go through phase 3 trials from the FDA. The total development time it actually goes back to 2009. So, 2009 to 2022, when we got FDA approved on our first shot, it's a 13-year R&D journey. So I think that kind of speaks to the clinical rigor that goes behind, not just a pharmaceutical product, but KYZATREX specifically and the work that was done. But yeah, again, 10 years ago, I looked at the space. Testosterone, it was known, but still had many of the same stigmas that it still has today. But this was just on the back of the FDA had changed labels and added cardiovascular risk. Even though we know today, and we knew back then that was really a myth as well, and testosterone is cardioprotective. But nonetheless, the space kind of got a little dry. We were looking at this, wondering, is this really true, or is this sound like in a lot of ways a miracle hormone, right? And all the things that it does, because most people think sexual health, muscle building, steroids, but testosterone is so much more, right? From cognitive function to cardiovascular health, bone, muscle, etc. So that really piqued our interest, and we said, let's bring this through phase 3, and then let's bring it to market. We drove the best data in the space. We started to see really unique attributes that we can get into, like free testosterone and SHBG, and a lot of good benefits on the safety side. So all these aspects really pointed us to what is a crucial drug for a population that is so big. Because if you look at testosterone levels declining, sort of decade over decade, how perverse this problem is today, those things really added up together to say, hey, look, we got a real winner here. And frankly, it needed a champion. Honestly, I think it's really become a passion project over here. And that's why we like going out and speaking as much as possible to really help educate and inform and push the discussion further.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of people don't realize that, there's this whole misconception of like, the bodybuilders and, the people that are taking steroids versus, I know people who have literally told me, they're like, testosterone completely changed my life. They're like, I was lazy, depressed, and next thing, he's like, I got happy. I started a business. I'm like more fit than I've ever been. Like, I mean, it's pretty incredible. And these are not people who are doing, they're not trying to be bodybuilders. They just, just regular people, entrepreneurs, CEOs, people who just want to be successful and have a good drive and vigor for life. So I know, again, it talked about kind of the potential cardiology, heart issues, but that's kind of been debunked these days. And I know recently a lot of studies have come out showing that actually supplementing with testosterone can help you obviously increase muscle, lose body fat, obviously lots of other benefits as well. So yeah, talk about, and then we also have the oral issue I want to talk about as well. So how is your oral, maybe we'll get into that. How is your oral testosterone different from previous oral testosterones from over the years?
So that's a really important point because, again, this is an education issue, right? So previous forms of oral testosterone, all the way back to being when it first was synthesized back in like 1935, was an oral form. So these were liver toxic. They went through first pass metabolism and they were toxic to the liver. And that's why they've really been thrown out as an option for all of this time until now, right? So what KYZATREX is able to do is it's lymphatically delivered. And what that means is it's absorbed through the small intestine. So it bypasses the first metabolism through the liver. It's absorbed through the small intestine, which does mean, yes, you do have to take KYZATREX with food. But we've run studies under different fat scenarios, whether it's, low fat, medium fat, high fat, and all showed, good absorption of the drug. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. But again, this myth of it's liver toxic is not applicable to KYZATREX. And also there may have been forms in the market that didn't have the formulation that we have delivered, right? It's a very elegant, unique formulation that doesn't require a ridiculous amount of fat with your meal, right? So that's also something I think people really need to know before they dismiss oral testosterone, is that, like, again, you don't need to take 30, 40, 50 grams of fat, which is, you don't want to do in a single meal to get absorption. And that's really important.
Could it, let's say you wanted to take the KYZATREX, but you weren't, didn't want to eat a full meal. Could you just do like 1 or 2 tablespoons of a high quality olive oil and take it with that? Would that work?
Good point. Yep, absolutely. So that's really a recommendation we see from a lot of clinicians out in the real world, is take it with olive oil or peanut butter, or if you are taking it with a small meal, you sort of supercharge it with again, an additional teaspoon of olive oil to get that absorption. And again, anecdotally, that's worked quite well.
Great. Yeah. So that's the first point that everyone's going to say when they hear oral testosterone. So we kind of talked about that. This is different than the other oral testosterones. It's not going through the liver. So that's an important point. The other thing with testosterone in general, we had on the show about a year ago, Dr. Sergey Zugin, who's someone I really look up to in the hormone space. I know him well. My friend is the CEO of his company. And, he came on here and he said he's been putting people on testosterone for years. And he always says he doesn't like the injections, especially the once a week injections, because you're getting a huge spike and then you're coming down and kind of crashing, and then you're spiking back up again. And this is the kind of thing that can cause potential side effects and, it's not the natural rhythm. And so, he explained on the podcast that, in the morning, your testosterone is supposed to naturally rise. And then towards the end of the day, it's supposed to naturally come down. And this is the natural rhythm. And so if you take testosterone in the morning, and then kind of let it wear off and come down by the evening, this is following your body's natural rhythm. And so you're going to have potentially less side effects, things like that. So is that kind of what you guys are thinking as well?
Absolutely. That's the philosophy, right? So I think a lot of drugs are developed for convenience, and that's why this once a week kind of concept is nice, because you only got to think about it once a week. But like as you rightfully mentioned, it's how do you more closely mimic what that body's natural rhythm is. One, because that's the most physiologic thing to do, right? So if you're going to do something to replace anything, you would want to do it in the most physiological way. But the second point to what you've alluded to is, when you take it for that 1 week period, you're going to have to take a dose that is going to put you in a super physiologic range for the front half of that week, right? And the bottom half of that week, you're going to be, sort of crashing back to baseline. So that's really what is as you mentioned, driving a lot of the typical side effects which you see in the testosterone category. So this is elevated hematocrit, right? Your red blood cell count gets pretty high. And that's why a lot of guys go ahead and have to dump blood, then creates, iron issues, right? Because you're giving too much blood or too frequently. You see excess estrogen conversion, right? So there's
talk about that. That's a big issue with testosterone, is people also seeing their estrogen go through the roof.
So I think it's there are obviously different schools, but it becomes such a thing because of testosterone injections that a lot of protocols almost blanketly give an anastrozole, which is an estrogen blocker,
Wow.
along with the testosterone injections. And yeah, personally, I don't think that's necessarily the right way to go. You do need estrogen. Men do need estrogen. Obviously, you don't want excess, but you don't want to cut that off either. So that's obviously one of the issues. Another issue with too much testosterone is your HPG access. Like it does shut down, right? You shut down your natural production. Your LH and FSH, which are the signals from the pituitary, on injections are pretty much undetectable. So granted, again, you're replacing the testosterone, so you're fine from that perspective. But a lot of the hesitation that guys experience is thinking, well, I'm shutting down my system completely. I'm going to have to be on this forever, which again may be beneficial to be on forever, which is fine. But this hesitation almost stops people from being on therapy. If I look at what we're able to achieve via oral, is we keep LH and FSH in the normal range. So there is suppression, but it's not all the way down to zero. And the analogy that a lot of clinicians like to use is, say you have a factory. You're within the injections, you're shutting down the factory, turning off the equipment, sending everybody home, locking up the doors, chained up. Yep. Right? On an oral, you're potentially maybe shutting down half of the equipment, sending half the staff home, but you're still humming a little bit, right? So it's just a new paradigm, and I'm sure there are clinical implications that we'd love to explore further, but I think it starts to introduce this or reduce the hesitation, I think, at least from patients saying, okay, it's a little more benign on my system.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is a huge thing I hear, and something I thought about myself too. And I always said like, oh, I'm gonna try to hold off as long as I can because I don't want to shut down my body's natural production, and that I'm gonna try to hold off as long as I can because I know once I start, I'm gonna have to be on it. I know that when I'm 44 now, I know I'm going to be on testosterone pretty soon. And once I start, most likely I'm going to be on it for the rest of my life. And so, but yeah, that's an interesting objection that people say. And so that's good. This is not completely shutting down your body's natural production. I think that is important for people, and then the other thing is obviously injections, right? So, I don't know about you guys, but I don't really feel like shooting myself with a needle, ever if I don't have to. I'm one of these people that really doesn't like needles, so I'm probably on the extreme side of the spectrum. But man, how much easier is it and less invasive to just take a pill than to do an injection?
Exactly. So like, I think there's two parts to that, right? One is just the pure, do I want to inject myself, and at what frequency, right? Because again, as you mentioned, the weekly injections you are sending, you're on this roller coaster a bit. So the goal may be, okay, let's reduce those. Then you might be at a couple times a week, right? And the more you ask or try to reduce the length between injections, obviously, again, the ask is much higher on the patient. So if you're saying, okay, at 44, I'm going to start this and I'm going to do this for 50 years, to do this every, multiple times a week for 50 years is a big ask versus taking a capsule, right? But I think, so that's a convenience factor, which again, honestly, as we were developing the product, we definitely saw leading the reasoning. But as we got into it, again, it's still an incredibly important reason, but I think we started to really see the benefits both on the efficacy side and the safety side, which became just as compelling and part of the education of why, KYZATREX. And again, just, disclaimer, right? KYZATREX is meant to treat guys with, no or low testosterone due to certain medical conditions, right? That's our label. That's the indication. But again, I think the data, we're in the second inning of kind of exploring how meaningful and impactful these efficacy and safety parameters can be on long-term implications.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to talk about if there's any kind of use cases or if any women are taking KYZATREX as well. Is there, and what do you think about that? Do you have a lot of women taking it, or is it meant for that, or no? Mostly men.
So KYZATREX is not indicated for females. It is a total off-label, practice if done. I think what's encouraging is that testosterone in females as a topic has come, sort of front and center, right? And this is alongside a general recognition of menopause and how important and how it affects female lives, right? And this is really come to the forefront with a lot of leadership from doctors like Dr. Rachel Rubin, Dr. Kelly Casperson, who we all work pretty closely with. And we know testosterone historically in females has really been used in sexual dysfunction, or that's really the area that it's been guided to. But again, we know that just like males, females have androgen receptors all over their body. They actually produce more testosterone or have more testosterone circulating in their bodies pre-menopause than they do estrogen. So, you think about it, it's not a male hormone. It is a male and female hormone. Just like men need estrogen, females need need testosterone. So I think the backdrop is incredibly favorable for a development program for KYZATREX in female. And that is something that we are at the early stages of, but we certainly plan to do the work, do the studies, work proactively with the FDA, who, again, historically has been against hormone therapy, but now I think has a new wind, which really, the FDA did a round panel a couple weeks back and talked about female hormone therapy, correcting a lot of the misconceptions, talking about all the benefits. This is the first time the FDA has acknowledged how important hormone therapy is in females. And I think that is a tremendous shift and the right thing to do. But coming out of our FDA commissioner's mouth, I think that means a lot. And that's really, really good for that patient population.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, Dr. Zugin, who I mentioned, he's helped so many women. Literally, countless testimonials he has of women who had no energy, could barely get out of bed, and now I'm living my best life. And again, if there is testosterone involved, there's obviously going to be other things as well for women, but it's going to be obviously at a much lower level. We're not saying that women are ever going to take the same amounts that men would, but even if it's 1/10 the dose, it could have a major impact. So I definitely see you guys doing that, especially because in your format, it's very easy to do a small dose. It wouldn't make sense for a woman to do an injection for such a tiny amount as well. So I could definitely see that happening.
Exactly.
One other thing I wanted to ask you about, because I know I've heard about KYZATREX with regards to, well, first let me back up. With regards to testosterone, people get a blood test. There's total testosterone and there's free testosterone. For some reason, over the years, everyone only talks about total testosterone when if I'm not, correct me if I'm wrong, but the free testosterone is really the important one that's available to be used, right?
Absolutely. So yes, you're absolutely right. Total testosterone is by far the one that's sort of discussed today, tested for, even people that are in the space don't always test free testosterone, but total testosterone is bound to a protein called SHBG. Right. And 98% of that total testosterone on average is bound to SHBG and actually unusable. It cannot enter the cell because of that bound.
And this is an issue I have too. So, and I learned recently that it's actually quite common with people who eat very healthy diets. Like I eat a very healthy paleo style diet, and my SHBG is I don't know what I'm like. I try to take all the supplements. I'm like, why, how do I get this thing down and free up more testosterone? So for those listening, it's like, if you could have 1,000, your testosterone could be 1,000, but if your SHBG is too high, your free testosterone could be, depending on how it's calculated, either 9 or 90 or something like that, which is like very low, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it's really interesting to think about that. So yeah, talk about what you guys found in your study with regards to, because I've been struggling with that myself. I've tried all the supplements, haven't been able to get mine down, and I want to free up more testosterone because that's the one that really matters. We all should be talking about the free test. What's your free testosterone? No one should even be mentioning the total.
Totally agree. Again, and I think it's a function of testing and the calculation, right? Free testosterone is often calculated, so they've just, the powers that be just have not let it be the main biomarker, even though it should be. But in terms of what the impact is, again, since most of it is bound to SHBG, and like you mentioned, good age, healthy lifestyle, but your SHBG is somewhat elevated. And that seems to be more and more common across the board. why this is. Typically the reasons may be, unhealthy reasons or alcohol consumption. But again, it does seem to be stemming into, again, the healthy population. So how do we reduce this? So KYZATREX, again, uniquely lowers SHBG. In our trial, we reduced SHBG by about 30%. And in some of the real world data that we've seen, the reduction has been anywhere between 30 and 50% of a reduction in SHBG. So this has been massively impactful because going back to our earlier part of our conversation, like the goal is physiologic testosterone, right? You really don't, taking it daily, you don't really want these super physiological peaks. So now we have a tool that in many cases can raise, your total T into a physiologic, mid physiologic range, but your free T gets liberated, and often, again, in our phase 3 trial, it 2x. Real world data abstracts, we've seen anywhere from a 2 to 4x increase in free testosterone. And again, that's with T levels in normal range. So you're avoiding the side effects, getting maximal impact from your free testosterone. And that's why we see great symptomatic responses.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a really important point there. So what about now, obviously, I'm curious with KYZATREX if this is the case as well, but if someone does want to have kids in the future, should they, obviously we know regular testosterone injections and cream is KYZATREX. Obviously, it probably wouldn't be ideal, but any thoughts on that?
Yeah. So any exogenous testosterone is going to suppress, or likely suppress fertility to a certain degree. There is a hypothesis around, again, daily pulsatile testosterone and what that does to sperm counts. So, and again, we talked about LH and FSH staying in the normal range. So there is, some effect there. It's hard to draw the line all the way through to fertility, but we are actually, one of our key opinion leaders, Dr. Mohit Khera, is running a study out of Baylor currently. It's a pilot study where he is looking at sperm counts in young men on KYZATREX. So I think this is the beginning of exploring this further, so you can make better judgments, right, clinically, if this is appropriate for younger men, because younger men are having a testosterone crisis themselves too. We're talking about 40, 50-year-olds, but this is becoming a problem between, guys in their mid to late 20s and early 30s as well, if you look at the numbers. So he did publish an abstract in the fall of last year. It was, again, just the beginning of the trial. So I think it was about 5 patients. 4 patients remained in normal sperm ranges. So that was quite promising. But again, it needs to be explored further. I just like to go back to, like, what's the most physiological thing to do, and what's the suppression ultimately look like? And that kind of can serve as a basis for someone trying to decide if this is right for them or not.
Yeah. And I think also, like, if someone's in their 20s or early 30s, I don't think, my personal opinion, again, I'm not a doctor, it's not medical advice, but my personal opinion is, like, you're probably not doomed for life. Like, if you really wanted to, you could get off and, get on enclomiphene or something, for a little while and try to kind of juice yourself back up or something like that. If you, kind of worst case scenario, I don't think it's like, oh, if I start taking, KYZATREX when I'm 30, I'm never going to be able to have a kid, right? Like, I think it's a lot more nuanced than that.
Not.
Yeah,
exactly. Right. And again, I do agree. Like, there's, very strong believer in the basic tenets and principles, right? Whether that's sleep, diet, stress, exercise, nutrition, right? You got to do these things right to serve a good foundation. But if you look at the next piece of the pyramid, it's definitely your hormonal health. That's really the next layer. And then you can get into, is, if this is a sort of discussion around longevity and whatnot, you get into the other, longevity compounds and the peptides and so forth. But your hormones, if they're out of whack, you really don't stand a chance.
Yeah, and what's funny, with everyone talking about, Ozempic and Mounjaro and all these all these weight loss drugs now, I always, like, for men, I'm always like, why would you do that when you could just do testosterone? I'm sure if you're really, obese, you probably have super low testosterone. Go get tested and start taking testosterone, and you'll feel better. You'll have more energy instead of taking this weight loss drug that I don't think is going to give you more energy and could potentially have all these side effects. It's like, it's pretty incredible. Yeah, let's maybe even talk about some of the studies that, KYZATREX or testosterone in general, right? I know there were some pretty big, I don't know if it was one specific study that came out in the last couple of years. I know Dr. Peter Attia was talking about it a little bit, about how, literally people who took testosterone in this trial showed much better markers in practically every area compared to people who did not, right? And this is, I think some of these people were not even like lifting weights, and they were like losing fat and gaining muscle and things like that. I don't know if you have a
Right.
little more
So there would
data you could
be,
shed.
yes. And again, I think there, always can be more studies, but it's known, right, that testosterone as a molecule has, different or multiple effects on the body, right? Even inflammation, right? It's anti-inflammatory. Yes, it works on muscle synthesis. It works at a mitochondrial level, right? So, if you want to think about it in the most basic sense, right? Like your cells, if they're not functioning properly with a void of testosterone and start functioning better, right? That has a cascade of downstream positive implications. So yeah, the patients that are on testosterone, again, and granted the baseline, they're deficient, right? And there's been the studies that said if higher T deficiency leads to all-cause mortality, right? So the chance of dying earlier because of a multitude of conditions is higher if you are testosterone deficient. So yeah, I think it makes sense that even at rest, like your body composition is going to be better because your muscle synthesis is better. So your baseline, you're burning fat, and that's what that muscle active tissue is doing, right? I
Yeah,
think
we've had multiple people on this podcast talk about the dangers of crash dieting, right? And now I think I'm going to watch this Netflix documentary about The Biggest Loser one, and I kind of already heard the story that many of them gain back all the weight because when you do this huge crash dieting of just like cutting your calories in half, sure, you'll lose weight in the short term, but you're basically wrecking your metabolism. Your metabolism's getting reset to this unreasonably low number, and then when you veer away from that, it goes you kind of gain the weight back. And so I kind of see that as potentially being an issue with these weight loss drugs. If you get off the weight loss drug, most likely you're going to get it back. However, if you went the other route and did, especially as a male, right, testosterone, and actually use that extra energy and ran with it, right, literally actually, and going to the gym and use that momentum to build some lean muscle, which will then continue to burn fat on its own and keep you in a healthy metabolism. For me, that would be, again, I'm not a doctor, it's not medical advice, just from based on what I've
that's
learned
the
from
long
recording
game.
over
That's
200
the
podcast
right long
episodes.
game. Absolutely, right.
Yeah.
And I think so. There's multiple things there, right? Yeah, you do not want to reduce your caloric intake to these unsustainable levels. Yes, you are wrecking your metabolism, and then again, as you're losing weight, a lot of that is lean muscle, right? So when you get off that crash diet and then you revert to your old habits, right? There needs to be behavioral change. If there's no behavioral change, you revert back to the old ways, then you're putting back 100% fat likely versus and that lost muscle is gone. You're not rebuilding that. So that's super important. I think the other piece to know is that, as these weight loss drugs have come to market and continued to do their clinical work, the doses that they're being administered obviously tend to increase and increase. So like, right, and most people have a starting dose on these drugs and then titrate up after certain periods of time to achieve sort of these peak weight loss numbers that they're after. That's really where I see the problem is because, and often the amount of let's use GLP-1 that's crossing the blood-brain barrier is 4 times higher than what's normal because you're on the clinical doses are not meant to be physiologic. They're actually meant to ratchet up higher to increase the weight loss within a 52-week period because that's the end point of the trial, right? It's amazing, actually, if you look at the data that's coming out today, because there's like 50 GLP-1 weight loss drugs in pipelines today for pharmaceutical companies, and a lot of these being oral. It's kind of amazing to me because they'll report data and say they'll lose 12% or 14% body weight over a 52-week period. That's less than what's happened at some of the injections. Might be at 20%, right? So and that's not good enough based on now the market, which is really scary, from an objective perspective, that now those, these drugs that are doing 12, 14% weight loss are not good. But maybe that's right. Like, you don't want the side effects, right? Like, you need to think about what is this physiological range. So again, personally, I think a very low dose GLP-1 is helpful from an inflammatory perspective. It does help reduce some of that food noise. But then, yes, if I'm testosterone deficient, I need that as well because it gets everything else going the way that you've discussed here. So you can continue to make that change, right? It's a virtuous, circle that you can get into.
Yep.
So there's a role for both, but I think the way that it's kind of transpired is just heavy, high doses of the GLP-1s, which I don't think most longevity doctors for sure that really understand the tools would be recommending.
Yeah, agreed. Let's so tell people maybe about some of the studies that you've done with KYZATREX. Who, and also let's talk about who shouldn't be on it, on testosterone, or maybe is with people with super high, who have very high blood pressure, something like that. Is there anyone who maybe should be very careful and potentially not be on it, or consult with a doctor and be really careful?
So good question. I mean, generally, look, on hormone therapy, consulting with the doctor is important, right? I think there's so many levers when it comes to hormone therapy, and maybe less in male than it is female, but it is really important to have somebody that understands this to be treating you. But in terms of non-candidates, so yes, so one really important thing is earlier this year, we got the black box. There used to be a black box on KYZATREX and other testosterone products. We actually got that off because, again, this goes back to the cardiovascular risk debate, which has been played out. Massive 5,000 patient study had been done, shows no increased risk on testosterone. So we have gotten the black box off, which is really important, I think, for patients as a baseline to understand from a safety perspective. Can testosterone in the short term still cause blood pressure to rise? Yes. So I think if you have uncontrolled blood pressure, it's something that your physician needs to monitor or control. And that's just per label, per guidance, makes sense. I think the other area that is quite cautious today, that is an evolving space, is around like prostate cancers. Again, I think if you have active prostate cancers, obviously your physician is going to be extremely careful and may not treat you with testosterone. But post resolution of that, then that's something that, again, they can look at, because
maybe address that too, because I think that's another rumor that I've heard swirling around over the years about testosterone potentially causing prostate issue. Can you address that as well?
Yeah, so that is a myth, and it's flat out been proven that testosterone does not cause prostate cancer. It was part of this 5,000 patient TRAVERSE study that I mentioned. There's no increased risk of prostate cancer. The problem is that, again, for many decades, urologists have been taught that it is a driver and that it fuels the fire, right? Because most prostate cancer drugs actually, it's called androgen deprivation therapy, right? It takes your testosterone down to zero, and that's part of the treatment course. So naturally, they think on the flip side, increasing it is going to cause these issues. There's a lot of good work, a lot of studies that have been done by folks like Dr. Abe Morgentaler, again, Dr. Mohit Khera, that look at sort of saturation levels, and after a certain point, it doesn't actually drive these things. So at large, it's I think that myth has been addressed, and it's not the cause. But anybody with active prostate cancers, your physician is going to be more careful at treating. So I think that's a patient population that you want to think about. Beyond that, look, again, testosterone is a safe molecule. It's I always talk about, like, you're replacing something that your body is missing, right? Yeah. Or is low on. It's not manipulating your cells or your processes and so forth, like most pharmaco agents do. You're literally just taking something that's depleted or missing and putting it back into your body. So your body knows what to do with it right away. It's not rocket science for it, right?
Right.
And I think that really opens up the patient population. Again, there are going to be nuances. There are going to be people that respond differently, but by and large, folks that are deficient, I think, one, symptomatically, it's important for them, like you kind of mentioned, like, how do you get into, again, this virtuous cycle? And even things like depression, right? I think this is an area that needs to be pulled back a lot further. The studies show almost at least this is one study that I'm citing, shows an 80% correlation with the depressive patient and low testosterone. And 20% of those patients had major depressive syndrome. So, but how often is testosterone tested before giving, SSRIs? Very rarely, right? So it just needs to be a better biomarker. It's about testing. I encourage every guy to go get his test levels, right? Whether you're young or old, know where you are as a baseline.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So one more question. Hair loss. Any correlation between? And I know obviously injections and higher doses would probably be a lot more prone to it with the spiking and stuff like that. On KYZATREX, do you have any data on that, or has it not been studied at all?
No data. We haven't studied sort of density or hair follicles. I think the point you made is generally, right, in the sense that pulsatile, right? It's like transient spikes in your body versus long sustained spikes probably drive different profiles there. And then again, look, some of us are less fortunate than others. We just have, we're just more susceptible to hair loss and sensitive to DHT, right? My view is if I can have the rest of my body functioning very properly, firing on all cylinders, I'd prefer that and be healthy than a great head of hair and be terribly unhealthy, right? Across the board.
Yeah. All right. So people listening now, I'm sure, let's say, you got your 40-year-old male, he's got low testosterone, or maybe, again, I don't know if this should be between the patient and their doctor only, but maybe in general, what people do ask me, what do you consider to be low testosterone? So if we say, and again, maybe we should just use the free number because that's the only one that matters, although some people may have only gotten the total tested. But I don't know if you're allowed to say, but in general, if someone would you say if you're under, 500 total testosterone and under, 12 for free testosterone, or any insights there?
Yeah, so I'll share a couple points and kind of, per guidelines and then per anecdotally, right? So typical ranges are today from labs are around 300 to 1,000, right? But this has been decreasing, again, through the years. So even some lab reference ranges today will say normal is 268, okay? And this is just because lab reference ranges are a reflection of our population. So that just goes down and down over time. I bet you there are local labs in certain parts of this country that have even worse population health, would be even lower than that, right?
Yeah.
Because of what's the population in that area. So I don't really think those are the right things to look. The guidelines from urology and endocrinology do use them. European guidelines are actually closer to 350. And again, I think that's a low number as well, but it kind of shows the difference between the US and the European. Look, these used to be in the 400s or 500s, right? If you go back 30 years. So if somebody can explain to me why you need less testosterone today than you did 30 years ago, I'm all ears, right? But we know that's not true. I think life is probably more demanding and more complicated in a lot of ways than it was back then, even though we have everything, right? Paradoxically. So, again, that's why I think it's really about how you're feeling. I think I would recommend a lot of, folks that are talking to more optimization places or longevity, like to help to really understand where those optimal ranges are, because I think that's where folks like me rather be. I'd rather be in an optimal range, not just slightly above what's normal. Right. But yeah, I think there's so much good and better information out there today that you can try and get to talk about these things. But that's why it's good to test earlier too. So say you're a healthy 25-year-old, 30-year-old, like test your levels. What was good for you, because we're all going to have different numbers that really the body feeds on. You might need more testosterone than I do to feel better. But again, I do think there's a baseline of this is probably the next stage as testosterone becomes more and more better understood. Is like, what's optimal for like healthy, right? Like we talk about let's talk about vitamin D, right? Vitamin D now, 20 years ago, nobody talked about. And now everybody understands is an important hormone. It's not a vitamin, it's a hormone, right? So you need to have a certain level. Nobody's really getting too granular and saying, well, you need to be, this is the range. most people are saying, look, you need to be above a certain number and then you're good. But the point is, you're not taking vitamin D because you're symptomatic. The physicians are recommending vitamin D because it's important in the body's processes. And that's what needs to be understood for testosterone. You may not be symptomatic, but I think where the puck is going to is to understand, what is this doing at a physiological stage for your body to function properly? And that's really where the conversation needs to go.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So people listening now, I'm sure there's a lot of men at this time. And look, obviously, definitely get tested. And like you just said, everyone should get tested at least once a year, ideally 2 to 3 times a year. Monitor your levels, see how you felt. You'll certainly see a change over the years. I saw my numbers, start to kind of inch down over the years as I got to 44 years old now. And so, I'm a big fan of, I do think that testosterone is a huge, huge game changer, life changer for many, many people. And I was never a fan of the injections. I was never a fan of the spikes, and so now that there's an oral testosterone that's totally healthy and safe to take and provides all these other benefits and goes in this natural rhythm, it's non-invasive, also doesn't completely suppress my own production. I mean, these are just, for me, this is the best it's ever sounded. So tell people, I guess, where can they go and find you? Obviously, they'll need to work with a practitioner. They can't just buy it on online or something, right? So what's kind of the process here for people interested?
So I would go, so actually you can get it online, but so I would go to KYZATREX.com, KYZATREX.com. And there you'll find obviously more information about the product, but you also find providers that are familiar with KYZATREX. So your local providers, close to you, in your area, but you will find some of our digital telehealth partners as well. So this has been, I think, sort of the beauty of technology coming along. You're still going to go get lab tested. So this is not a fully virtual process. You still need to go get lab tested so you have your numbers, or you can upload your labs if you have them right. You're quite on top of things and have your labs, recent labs, that is, and then meet with a clinician virtually as well. So we have a couple partners like that we can that you can go to also, if warranted, get on KYZATREX as well.
Great. So they go KYZATREX.com, and then, they would go there. They would kind of sign up. They would do some sort of, you'd have your recommended providers. They'd sign up, do some intake form with the provider, get a blood test, confirm that their numbers are not where they want it to be. And obviously a lot of it's based on how they're feeling right now. So people who know that they're not feeling as good as they should be, don't have as much energy and those kind of things as they know they should have. So they would go through, do that intake, get a blood test, see their levels, and then based on that, the provider would be able to prescribe KYZATREX to them, right?
Absolutely. Exactly.
Great. Excellent. And what's the typical, I guess some people will probably be wondering, what's a typical price point?
So typical price point, usually for an all-inclusive service, again, you're talking about clinician visits, labs and whatnot. You're probably around $249 a month, $250 a month, all
Very
in,
reasonable.
right? So, and again, then often patients are not taking other medications with that, right? So there's some potential cost savings there that they see, plus all the benefits that we've already talked about. So again, that's really why we think this is an access story, right? Patients have been sort of withheld from access. We also know the traditional insurance systems and payer systems don't provide access to innovative products like KYZATREX at large. So how could we make this, from a pricing perspective, not too different than what people are doing today, right? There's a lot of people that charge $200 a month for an injection program, right? Here's again, what's the delta? I mean, that's honestly, a dinner or two out in the evening at this point in time, right? Or that's a 1 or 2 sporting events a year. You paying for your entire year of KYZATREX at this point. So I think again, value is to the person, right? But I think if you can improve every single day, both symptomatically and then underlying health, then it's a pretty good deal.
Absolutely, man. Well, Shalin, this has been really great. I'm so happy to be able to educate our community on what I feel is the best form of testosterone right now in the market. It's new; a lot of people haven't heard about it yet. So I'm glad that we're able to spread this message, and encourage people to go to KYZATREX.com and check it out. Any final words here before we sign off?
No, look, appreciate you having me on. Again, I think, as you mentioned, education is the key here. Arm yourself, make sure you have the right questions. If you have a provider, don't be discouraged by your provider. Honestly, I think that's one of the biggest things that we as patients need to do in today's environment is come armed with your information so you can best advocate for yourself.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Well, hopefully we could do it again sometime.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, it would really mean a lot to me if you would forward this episode along to any friends, family members, anyone that you think that would get value out of it and learn something important. The mission at Peak Performance is to help people prioritize and transform their health. And so if you think someone will get value, please, please, please do forward this episode along to them. Also, if you could please rate and review and subscribe on whatever podcast player you are listening to this on, we would greatly appreciate that as well. It means a lot. And I want to tell you about a couple of new products that we just released. You can get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com. That's BUY peakperformance.com. We just released a brand new grass-fed beef protein isolate. This is my favorite new protein powder because it's great for muscle building and recovering and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't give the stomach discomfort and gas that a lot of people get from different types of proteins like whey protein. Some types of plant proteins can do the same as well. It seems to be really, really easy on the stomach while still giving all the great benefits of muscle building and everything else that you want from taking in adequate protein. So check out our new beef protein isolate. We have it in unflavored, which I actually mix and blend with my morning coffee every morning. We have a vanilla and we have a chocolate. You can buy it on Amazon, but again, you also do get 20% off your first order at buypeakperformance.com, BUY peakperformance.com. We've also recently released organic mushroom coffee. We have these in Keurig compatible K-Cup coffee pods. We have organic mushroom coffee with lion's mane, reishi, cordyceps, turkey tail, and chaga mushrooms blended with the high altitude organic coffee that we've been using and that we've been famous for years. So that's been a big hit, that one as well. You can get on our website or Amazon, any of our products. And of course, we're always famous for our organic green superfood powder that has almost 5,000 reviews on Amazon with a very high star rating. We're known as the best tasting USDA certified organic green superfood powder with over 25 plus organic ingredients. Again, we also have the organic red superfood powder. We still, of course, have the organic plant protein for those who do prefer the plant protein, but I'm really excited about this new beef protein isolate and all of our other products. We do have over 100 products, so just check us out if you type in Peak Performance Supplements on Amazon or if you go to buypeakperformance.com. Thank you so much, and we'll talk to you again soon.